issues are associated with women's rights? Maybe equal opportunity, maybe equal pay. Those issues might be what comes to mind for those of us living in the United States, but globally, millions of women not only don't share equal rights with men, they also lack the most basic of human rights. So I researched the topic of bride burnings in India, and I was appalled to find that those acts of violence still occur today. What drives those acts of violence? Well, in India, it's the ancient practice of the dowry. So today, I'll explain the practice of the dowry, what it is, how it began, how and why it's still practiced in India today, and the consequences of it not being met, and also what's being done to wipe it out. So you have to kind of understand the beginnings of that practice of the dowry to help gain an understanding of what the dowry is today. So it began in medieval times. It was a one-time gift from the bride's family to the groom's family to help secure that bride's future and to also help that couple get started. But today in India, the practice of the dowry is totally different. It's a gift that's expected to keep on giving. So it's given for the original occasion of the wedding, and then it's also given for birthdays, for anniversaries, for the birth of a child. It's constant and crushing demands on that bride's family. The consequences of the demands not being met are physical and mental abuse to those daughters. So to understand the practice of the dowry, you kind of have to understand women's roles in India today. So when a girl is born to a family in India, that family starts saving for her dowry the day she's born. They realize that that dowry means a lot. It can give security to their daughter, but it also gives family status, and family status is everything to the people of India. The main religion that's practiced in India is Hinduism. And in Hinduism, there are clearly defined gender roles. So men are expected to be educated. They are expected to go out in the workplace. While women are uneducated, they're often illiterate. And they're expected to stay home and take care of the house and the family. When women are married into the man's family, they are go live with that family, and there are multiple generations there, and the person who has the very least status is that new bride. The other power besides the power of the male is the power of the mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law has power over that daughter-in-law. And so if there are acts of violence against that daughter-in-law, those are acted out by the mother-in-law. And you have to understand that that mother-in-law was once the daughter-in-law, and now her status has moved up. So because of that, that cycle just keeps going on and on and on. So a basic understanding of dowry practice in India brings up a question of the roles and the laws of India's government. So I'd like to read Article 1 of the UN Universal Declaration of Independence. It states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience, and they should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, the UN was formed in 1942, and a founding member of the UN was India. They actually helped draft that document. It wasn't until the Anti-Dowry Act of 1961 that dowries were illegal in India. So there's an article in 2013 from the Pulitzer Center, and it states that an amendment to the law in 1986 mandated that any death or violence within the first 7 years of a marriage would be tried as dowry related. Well, we in Western culture might say, those laws are in place to make everything better. Why hasn't it changed? In India, those acts go unreported, especially in rural India, where there's a lack of female education and illiteracy, and those women feel trapped. There is no alternative for them. They live in fear for themselves, and they don't want to bring shame to their family. According to a 2017 article in the publication Reset, the National Crime Records Bureau reports that in 2010 there were 9,310 dowry-related deaths in India. This seems like it's a hopeless situation. It can also lead to two other situations that are directly dowry-related, and that is extremely high suicide rates for women in India who just crack under the pressure. And it also leads to something called infanticide, which is when a female child is born and the family knows that they can't meet the dowry demands. It will take away from their ability to survive. So they do take the life of that daughter. So, what can bring about a change? Well, there's increasing rates of education for metropolitan women. And there's also that same Reset article that we referenced earlier points out that there's a need for public awareness campaigns that will help to stigmatize reporting abuse. And if there's positive media coverage of women who go to the police and report these crimes, it will empower other women to do the same thing. There's a 2013 article in the International Digest that suggests that men dominate, control, and oppress women in India. India's society must change the views of men, and this must happen through educating children at a very early age. So the most powerful tool, however, is probably social media. There's communication through blogging and sharing events that are happening and blogging them as they happen. And this will bring about a world audience, and this audience can bring a pressure for change. In summary, I've shown a history of ancient and current practices of the dowry. I've shown why rural India is so steeped in this cultural practice. We've looked at the role of government in India and why these acts go unpunished, and I've pointed out the forces to bring change. Through education, global awareness, and stamping out the stigma of reporting, the women of India can find their voice, gain dignity, and share rights that are equal to those of men.